Humans engage in what for amusement? Commander Kell's translation device whirred and clicked, struggling to interpret the confusing spectacle before him. Around the training area, lines of human cadets trudged through mud, rain striking their faces, while cries of motivation and derision flew from instructors dressed in dark green attire. To Kell's perception, it seemed more akin to an exercise in insanity than military regimen. His blue-skinned aide, Lieutenant Varick, adjusted his focus, similarly baffled. "Sir," Varick faltered, glancing nervously at the humans. "Our intelligence indicated this was one of their foremost military academies. Perhaps this is customary?" Kell folded his arms. "Customary? Observe them. This is not instruction. It is torment." The commander, originating from the Keshek fleet, a species recognized for its composed intellect and inclination towards sophisticated warfare strategies, had expected a tour filled with tactical conversations, not a descent into a scene of primitive disorder. He started to think that their concepts of military training were fundamentally different. A human officer came near, his uniform drenched, yet his face bore a smile that appeared entirely out of place given the grim weather. "Commander Kell?" he called out, offering a handshake that Kell hesitantly took. "Welcome to West Point. I am Major Harlow, your guide for today." Kell gave a rigid nod, attempting to avert his gaze from the odd sparkle in the human's eyes. "Major Harlow, could you clarify what precisely these cadets are undergoing?" The major chuckled, the noise reverberating over the training grounds. "Merely a brief exercise known as Field Week. It imparts lessons in cooperation, endurance, and how to operate when everything is deteriorating." Harlow indicated a group of cadets maneuvering beneath netting, their uniforms smeared with muck. "See that? That is what we term the mud pit crawl. It develops character." "Develops character?" Kell echoed, turning to Varick, whose features had become progressively more worried. "You consider compelling them through grime a character-developing activity?" "Not just any grime," Harlow stated, lifting a finger as though conveying profound knowledge. "That is entirely natural premium-grade mud, the finest type for training." Kell's jaw went slightly slack as he attempted to comprehend the assertion. Varick quickly whispered, "Perhaps it is a metaphor, sir. They are using metaphorical language." "I wish it were that straightforward," Kell murmured, watching as a cadet lost his footing, landing face first directly into the mud. The human cadet merely rose, cleaned his face, and resumed the crawl without pausing. It was as if they seemed to flourish amidst hardship. The Keshek instructed their soldiers using simulations and controlled settings. Bodily unease was regarded as an unneeded impediment. Here, the humans appeared to delight in it. "Come along," Harlow gestured, guiding them onward along the path. "This is merely the start." The trio advanced towards an obstacle course of hellish scale. It was a jumble of rope ascents, towering barriers, barbed wire, and something Kell could only identify as a water-filled trench, engineered purposefully to shatter resolve. "What purpose does this serve?" Kell inquired, fearing the response. "Ah, this is the crucible," Harlow announced proudly, "the culminating trial of their training. They undertake it lacking sleep and sustenance. If they reach the conclusion, they have secured their position." Kell blinked, trying to comprehend the utter dreadfulness of it. "You deliberately withhold nourishment and rest?" "Absolutely," Harlow affirmed, betraying no unease. "It is a lesson in surpassing boundaries. We dismantle them here so opponents cannot achieve it later." The concept was foreign to Kell in both senses. Keshek warriors were trained to preserve optimal physical and cognitive states, provided sufficient rest and nourishment to optimize performance. The notion of weakening one's own troops before they even encountered combat was absolute insanity to him. "If I might," Varick interposed carefully, "what percentage of your cadets finish this crucible?" "Oh, approximately 95%, Harlow answered nonchalantly. "Some drop out, certainly, but that is how you distinguish those desiring to be soldiers from those destined to be soldiers." Kell felt his stomach lurch. The Keshek fleet admitted only those who passed their rigorous cognitive evaluations, and even then they did not expose their applicants to such harshness. He turned his attention to the cadets clambering over a timber barrier, their faces wincing with exertion. yet eyes gleaming with a strange blend of concentration and, perhaps, enjoyment? Harlow guided them onward, unaware of Kel's unease. Next, I will show you the survival training. You will surely appreciate this. The alien commander highly doubted that assertion. They arrived at a wooded region where cadets were gathered together, each grasping what seemed to be basic implements. What are they occupied with? Kel inquired, his tone tinged with mistrust. Constructing shelters, Harlow replied casually. They must pass the night outdoors with only a knife and some rope. Kel retreated a step, horrified. You dispatch them into the wilderness with merely a knife? That is correct, Harlow said with a contented affirmation. It teaches them to adjust. The environment is the finest instructor there is. Finest instructor? Kel echoed, finding it difficult to comprehend. He pictured Kashek troops stranded in comparable surroundings. They would depend on technological aids, not primitive survival methods. The institution's approach grew progressively more apparent and dreadful. Humans accepted hardship not as something to circumvent, but as an instrument for forging strength. Harlow indicated a cadet excavating the ground using only his hands. See that? He is creating a fire hollow. One cannot endure without heat. Kel glanced at Varric, who was jotting down notes rapidly, his antennae quivering, indicating profound anxiety. This differed from their expectations. They had heard humans were redoubtable combatants, but the cause was now starkly apparent and profoundly disturbing. These beings refined themselves under the harshest circumstances and displayed their hardship like a mark of distinction. It wasn't merely their technology or tactics, it was their determination to withstand the unimaginable. The commander massaged his temples. How do they withstand this? He asked, scarcely concealing his mounting worry. Harlow smiled. It's straightforward. They accept it. You see, Commander, humans do not merely endure hardship. We flourish because of it. Kel gulped, looking over the cadets once more. They were soaked, chilled, famished, and yet somehow irrefutably vital. This tour was a long way from concluding, and already Kel felt a growing feeling of apprehension. If this represented human training, what potential did they possess in conflict? The tour proceeded, much to Commander Kel's increasing unease. Major Harlow's zeal appeared only to intensify as they neared another segment of the academy. A sizable open area encircled by tall barriers and lined with peculiar-looking devices. The distant reverberations of explosions filled the air, causing a tremor along Kel's spine. What exactly is this location? Kel asked, preparing himself for yet another strange disclosure. This, Commander, is our live ammunition practice area, Harlow replied proudly. It is where we evaluate their precision, poise, and rapid decision-making under duress. Kel glanced around, observing the countenances on the human cadets' faces. They displayed no indications of fear, only a stern concentration as they managed their firearms with exactitude. In the Kashek fleet, live fire drills were designated for the most skilled, carried out under regulated conditions to ensure optimal security. Here, the humans seemed to disregard prudence. It was another reminder of how differently these inhabitants of a hazardous world addressed conflict. Watch, Harlow said as he indicated a line of cadets. Each was outfitted with a cumbersome apparatus secured to their backs, with conduits and cabling leading into what looked like a missile launcher. The cadets assumed their positions, and at the sound of a whistle, they sprinted ahead, maneuvering around barriers as they shot at mobile objectives. Those are our combat exercises, Harlow clarified. The cadets must strike all objectives precisely while dodging mock hostile volleys. It maintains their alertness. Kel watched in appalled captivation. The cadets maneuvered smoothly, their movements appearing haphazard yet strangely coordinated. When one faltered or failed to hit an objective, an instructor would immediately shout commands, compelling the cadet to redo the exercise. There was zero tolerance for mistakes. They are severe with their own people, Varric whispered, his antennae quivering erratically. Lack of success appears to receive no leniency. Kel nodded, his gaze locked on the activity. And yet they persist onward, he murmured. There is no uncertainty, no reconsideration. They act as if peril is integral to the standard procedure. As they walked further along the range, an abrupt detonation occurred nearby, along with a column of smoke. Kell reflexively crouched, shielding his head with his arms, while Varric struggled to keep his footing. The Kashek commander whirled about, eyes wide with fright. A group of cadets had assembled near an excavation where they were utilizing what seemed to be ordnance. "Steady there, Commander," Harlow said, evidently entertained. "Just a little grenade practice." Kell stood upright, feeling his pulse quicken. "Grenades? You provide these novices with ordnance to train with?" "Of course," Harlow replied, "if they do not learn how to manage them correctly in this setting, how can we expect them to employ them proficiently on deployment?" The logic made a perverse kind of sense, but it significantly exceeded what Kell could tolerate. In Kashek military training, managing ordnance was a duty assigned to specialist teams, instructed via simulations in controlled environments. Yet here, human cadets were lobbing active grenades into ditches as if it were a routine activity. "Why undertake such hazards?" Kell asked, his voice tight. "Surely there are more secure procedures." Harlow gave him a sideways look, his countenance becoming surprisingly grave. "There is no safety in warfare, Commander. The earlier they grasp that, the more advantageous it is. It concerns mastering danger, not evading it." The words lingered significantly in the air, leaving Kell to contemplate the outright boldness of the human approach. To the Kashek, war was an issue of tactics, technology, and preserving a secure separation from chaos. For the humans, war seemed to be something that flourished amidst the turmoil, something they aimed to conquer through pure determination and direct involvement. They continued onward, moving past a sequence of fortified structures where the cadets drilled in confined space fighting. Kell watched in shocked quiet as they participated in unarmed combat exercises, fighting with a fierceness that caused his stomach to roil. This was not a simulation. It was unrefined, instinctive fighting, waged with hands, knees, and elbows. He noted how the supervisors intervened solely when a cadet was near total exhaustion, just to guarantee they would rise again and continue battling. "You call this training?" Kell exclaimed, incapable of restraining himself. "These cadets are aggressively confronting one another." "Exactly," Harlow answered calmly. "Because the adversary will be as well. If they cannot manage a peer cadet, they will have no possibility of success yonder." Kell had difficulty formulating a reply. Varric, standing beside him, was writing notes rapidly, his hand trembling with a combination of fright and confusion. The commander inhaled deeply, attempting to compose himself as they moved to the final part of the tour. Harlow escorted them to a sizable structure with strengthened doorways. "Now, I reserved the finest part until the end," he said, unveiling a faintly illuminated chamber filled with strange pods arranged along the partitions. Cadets were securing themselves within these pods, their expressions fixed with a resolve that disquieted Kell. "What is this place?" Kell inquired warily. Harlow walked over to one of the pods and rapped on it. "Simulated battle instruction. This is where we subject them to intense trials without physically dispatching them to the front lines." Kell breathed out faintly in relief. Finally, something that corresponded more nearly with Kashek military philosophy. Virtual simulations were a crucial element of their instruction as well. However, as he watched the pods illuminated and heard the remote noises of combat through the walls, he understood there was a distinction. The cadets were not serenely evaluating situations or conducting tactical drills. They were shouting, crying out commands to each other, battling as if their existence hinged on it. "They undergo every facet of the battle," Harlow explained, observing Kell's perplexed expression. "Pain, exhaustion, fear. We render it maximally authentic." Kell sensed his legs grow unsteady. Even their simulations were engineered to drive the cadets to the brink of mental stability. There was no means of evasion, no area of ease in which to retreat. The humans fully embraced the stark actualities of war, instilling them profoundly within their mentality long before they ever encountered an actual foe. Harlow turned to Kell with an inquiring sparkle in his gaze. "Quite remarkable, wouldn't you say? Most people cannot fully comprehend the significance of being a soldier in this place before witnessing it firsthand." Kell gulped, looking again at the cadets in the pods. He could scarcely credit what he had observed so far, and this was only the training. What did that imply about the humans who emerged from it, shaped into combatants by this harsh trial? I... Kell began, his voice wavering. I think I am starting to comprehend, Major, but I am uncertain if I am able to accept it. Well, Commander, Harlow replied with a slight, insightful smile, you have witnessed merely a portion of the whole. Kell's stomach plummeted. Only part? There was more? The idea dispatched a shiver along his spine as he realized this visit was nowhere near complete. Commander Kell felt a weight upon his chest as he trailed Major Harlow further into the maze-like complex of the Academy. He was previously inundated by what he had seen, but the prospect of additional sights made him feel anxious. Yet some part of him, driven by equivalent measures of inquisitiveness and fear, compelled him onward. This way, Commander, Harlow called, gesturing toward a modest structure at the perimeter of the campus. Kell was unable to speculate on its contents, but he prepared himself for any frights the humans had devised subsequently. Stepping through the entrance, they found themselves in a constricted passageway bordered by heavy doors. Harlow led them to one and opened it, revealing an austere chamber containing a single chair and a collection of screens. A young cadet remained at attention inside, his stance stiff despite the clear fatigue imprinted on his features. Welcome to the stress evaluation chamber, Harlow said with a grin. This is where we drive the cadets to their psychological boundaries. Kell felt a rush of anxiety. Mental limits? Elucidate. Harlow turned to the cadet, offering him a nod. Cadet, initiate Level 6 simulation. The cadet sat down, securing himself in the seat as the chamber illumination faded. The screen sprang to life, showing a turbulent combat environment. Kell watched in shocked quiet as the cadet began to transmit commands, his gaze flitting over the displays. It rapidly grew clear that the simulation was engineered to inundate him. Enemy forces materialized from every direction, unforeseen impediments emerged, and each choice carried repercussions. This exercise inundates them with numerous emergencies at once, Harlow explained, his voice colored with satisfaction. We saturate their perceptions to see how they handle turmoil, fatigue, and duress. It is about compelling them to make difficult decisions, to reason when all intuition urges panic. Kell glanced at the cadet's face, observing the droplets of perspiration forming on his brow while he shouted commands at the screens. His hands shifted rapidly, attempting to orchestrate the mock engagement, as sirens sounded and simulated detonations illuminated the monitors. Level 6 is tough, Harlow continued. The majority of cadets find it challenging, but if they can maintain composure in this situation, they will be more adequately readied for actual battle. The scene on the screens became progressively more chaotic. The cadet found himself encircled, his mock troops disorganized, but he persevered, delivering orders with intense resolve. Kell found himself retaining his breath, less from respect and more from apprehension. The Kashek commander had never seen training like this, a drill so demanding that it seemed to erode the fundamental boundaries of the mind. Finally, the simulation concluded, with the cadet sagging back in the chair, his chest rising and falling heavily as he tried to regain his breath. Harlow walked over, patting the young individual on the shoulder. Good job, cadet. You endured for a greater duration this instance. The cadet produced a faint nod before Harlow signaled for Kell and Varric to step back into the hallway. As the door closed behind them, Kell felt a disquieting tension increase in his stomach. Why? He asked, fighting to maintain a level tone. For what reason do you subject them to this? Harlow turned to face Kell, his demeanor atypically serious. Because conflict does not pause until they are prepared. It attacks during their most fragile periods, their most susceptible junctures. We do this so that when they are deployed, confronting the actual adversary, they will not shatter. Kell desired to contend, to disprove this harsh doctrine, but an element in Harlow's gaze halted him. There was a blunt reality there, a severe actuality that Kell was hesitant to embrace. The humans didn't instruct their combatants to evade difficulty, they educated them to withstand and conquer it. The understanding hit him like a physical impact. Harlow led them back outside where they could hear the remote cries of cadets from the training grounds. The rain had started again, a chilly, persistent shower that penetrated Kel's attire. Yet as he looked around, he saw the cadets persisting with their drills, apparently unaffected by the conditions. They operated with a fierceness that was both alarming and impressive. "You see, Commander," Harlow said, his voice interrupting Kel's reflections, "this academy is not just about instructing them in combat. It is about educating them to adjust, to withstand. We remove their conveniences, drive them to their limits of endurance, so they discover their true potential. And that is the source of our threat." Kel felt a shiver course down his spine, and it was unrelated to the precipitation. He at last comprehended the essence of human conflict. It was not their armaments, tactics, or technological prowess that rendered them imposing. It was this unyielding motivation, this unwillingness to yield to hardship. They conditioned their intellects and physiques to accept the turmoil of battle, transforming difficulty into their most potent armament. Harlow nodded, almost as though discerning Kel's reflections. "You arrived here seeking knowledge about our military, Commander, and currently you are informed. We do not just ready our troops to confront the foe. We equip them to encounter all challenges, each fear, every suffering, every impediment. And that is why, when the moment arrives, our adversaries invariably pause." Kel gulped, his attention wandering across the academy grounds. It was not just an instructional center. It was a trial by fire, a smithy that shaped young individuals into combatants of unbending resolve. For the first time, he felt a spark of authentic apprehension. The Kashek fleet possessed might, their strategic prowess faultless, but they had no equivalent to this. He turned to Varric, who was gazing with wide eyes, his antennae quivering. "We have observed sufficiently," Kel said quietly. "Arrange our exit." Varric assented swiftly, inputting instructions into his apparatus. Kel turned back to Harlow, locking eyes with him a final time. "You have revealed a great deal to us today, Major," he conceded, his tone carrying reluctant admiration. "I perceive now the reason humans inspire fear on the battlefield." Harlow smiled, yet it lacked any sense of victory. "Instilling fear is not our objective, Commander. It is merely a consequence of the lengths we will go to guarantee success." With that, Kel gave a brief nod, pivoting away and moving towards the shuttle hangar. As they embarked upon their vessel, he threw a final look at the academy, its imposing ramparts and vast practice areas enveloped in the downpour's mist. The sight would remain with him, a sobering memento of what he had witnessed. As the transport ascended, Kel knew that the Kashek High Council would treat his account with considerable gravity. They had misjudged these inhabitants of a perilous world, these humans who were instructed not merely for survival, but for supremacy. And the galaxy would shortly comprehend the complete gravity of that miscalculation.